Welcome to the Power of Three interview series. 3 questions will be answered today, 3 action items for you to improve your business, and 3 resources for you to keep learning and growing. This is Roberto Monaco with InfluenceOlogy, and today I'm really excited about this call because we have a very smart gentleman with us from Australia, Jon Steel, the author of an awesome book that I recommend you to get. It's called Perfect Pitch. I'm going to include the picture here. The Art of Selling Ideas and Winning New Business. Jon, how's it going, my friend?
Pretty good, thanks, Roberto. Nice to talk to you from the other side of the world.
I love that. I love your commitment level. I'm going to tell how we got connected. Now, Jon, for those who don't know, Jon has been an advertising executive for 30 years. He actually the co-creator of the campaign Got Milk that we see on TV all the time. He actually helped develop the campaign. He also wrote a book, Truth, Lies, and Advertising. I haven't read that yet, but I'm going to get today. In his career, he has closed over $1 billion in business, in advertising business. He received several awards, including awards from American Marketing Association. He's a phenomenal storyteller, very creative guy, and currently he is the planning director for WPP, which, for those who don't know, is the largest marketing communication company. I think it's the biggest one. And they have 165,000 employees. In 2012, the revenues up over 10 billion euros. So a huge company. He is one of the guys running the show. So I'm very, very honored to have you here today with us. So I appreciate your time. Now, I read Jon's book, which is awesome. And I read pretty much every single presentation book out there. And in the end of it, I'm like, I'm going to invite Jon to do an interview with us. And I realized, I'm like, he lives in England. So I started tracking him down and finally connected. He goes, no, Roberto, I'm in Australia. And then we went back and forth about figuring out our time. Because right now in San Diego, it's 7:15 in the evening. What time is it in Australia right now?
It's 10:15 in the morning.
10:15 in the morning.
A bit more civilized for me than it is for you. Sorry about that.
So I really appreciate your commitment level to InfluenceOlogy community to help us out here. So I have 3 questions here. The first question I have for you is this. What makes the difference between a company succeeding or failing in new business?
Well, I mean, obviously, most of my experience in new business is with advertising agencies. So I hope that what I have to say will be relevant to the range of your people. But I think there's a few things that define success. You know, one is clarity of purpose. Companies that have a very clear idea of who they are and what they stand for tend to do better than companies that don't. There's a lot of companies that seem to exist just for the purposes of making money. Mm-hmm. And as Hewlett and Packard said when they started their company, now known to the world as HP, a company's got to have a bigger purpose than that. And your employees have to be able to get out of bed in the morning being excited about doing something that has a higher purpose. And Hewlett-Packard could have started by saying, we're going to make the world's best cathode ray oscilloscope. Mm-hmm. Just as Sony could have started saying, we're going to make the world's best rice cooker, which is the first product they made. But they didn't. And Hewlett-Packard, their company was launched on the basis of creating technology to benefit mankind, just as Sony's was launched to try to make Japan synonymous with quality in a world that saw Japanese products as sort of cheap and inferior. So, I mean, in my experience of advertising companies, okay, and my observation of the manufacturing companies, service companies that we work for, it's having something that goes a bit beyond just making a widget. So got to be ambitious and clear, I suppose, in purpose. Mm-hmm. A company that does well in new business is also very consistent in the way it presents itself.
Okay.
And everybody in the company, from the person who picks up the phone to the person who delivers coffee, will have a very clear idea of what the company stands for and will easily be able to talk about it to anybody who asks. There's a great story, maybe apocryphal, of John F. Kennedy visiting NASA, at the height of the space race, mm-hmm. and he took time out from his official engagement to go and take a leak. and there was a janitor in the bathroom, and Kennedy said, "Hi, what you're doing?" And the janitor put down his mop and said, "Mr. President, I'm helping put an American on the moon."
That's awesome.
That is a company that would do very well in new business. Companies do well in new business if they produce good work for their existing clients. Mm-hmm. There is no better new business tool than A, the quality of work you've done for other people,
yep.
and B, the references given to you by those happy customers. And the idea, when I worked at Goodby Silverstein in San Francisco, which went from being a very small regional agency to one of the best agencies in the world, we got to a point in our new business where our strategy was to answer the phone. In the early days, that wasn't the way it was, obviously. But by producing terrific work that got noticed by other people, mm-hmm. They would then contact us. So when we created the Got Milk campaign, for years afterwards, clients would call us from all over the country saying, "Can I have a Got Milk, please?" And you'd say, well, in some cases, I'm sorry, you're a dishwashing liquid. Got Milk won't work for you. Got Milk works because it's milk, and the only time you think about it is when you haven't got any. That might work for a I don't know. But that's what you want to aim for. And then I think there are three very important questions a company has to ask. So if that call comes in, if a potential customer wants you to pitch their business, mm-hmm. then you've got to ask yourselves these three questions. You've got to ask, first of all, do we want that business? And when I say do we want it, I mean, will working with that customer represent a good relationship? Will it be good for the people in our company? Will it be good for our profile? Do we and that customer share common values and ambitions? Because if the answer to that is no, then it could actually be worse to win it than to
Isn't it hard though? Like a lot of people, we're coming off a recession where people they have the scarcity mindset.
No, it's even more important in a recession than it is out of a recession, because in a recession, most companies are pared down to the bare bones. Everybody is working very hard and probably doing more than the job of one person. Mm-hmm. If you're going to pitch some new business, you have to go above and beyond that. You're working late nights, you're working weekends. And my whole point in posing these three questions is, how do you increase your chances of winning? And how do you reduce your chances of losing? Because winning's great. Winning brings in new income. Winning brings new opportunities, new markets, all of those sorts of. There's a lot of great emotional advantages to winning as well as financial. Mm-hmm. But if you lose, there's an equally large number of emotional consequences in terms of people being tired, demotivated, their confidence battered, mm-hmm. And if you get into a relationship that isn't right, then it can destroy the morale of your company, and you have to make decisions based on what you know to be best for your company. Mm-hmm. And just following the dollar, it might be a smart thing in the short term, but in the medium to long term, it's almost never so. So the first question is, do you want the business? The second question is, do we realistically believe that we can win it? Not would we like to think we can win it, okay. Not would we like to win it, but can we win it? And I've been involved in a couple of pitches over the years where I've been asked to come into teams and help the pitch process. And it's been very clear to me from the start that we had absolutely no chance of winning, that the client had already emotionally fired the agency. Even if out of respect they were saying, well, we'd like you to participate in the review. Mm-hmm. Even though we're inviting other agencies to pitch, we'd still like you as the incumbent to make a presentation. But with no expectation whatsoever that the agency would do anything good. And you've got to be really hard on that. And if the answer is no, we don't think we have a chance, we think the client has emotionally already fired us, then you just say, look, we're very proud of the work we've done, we're very proud of what's happened during this relationship, but we respectfully decline the offer to repitch because we think you would prefer a new agency, and please go and find a new relationship with our blessing, and then focus on things that you can win, and that are going to help win your business, that help grow your business.
That's the second question is kind of difficult because a lot of people, especially in America, will have the mindset of like believe, even though the situation may tell us that we can win the business, right?
Yeah.
You want it, but you can, but you have the whole positive psychology mindset of like, I'll find a way.
No, well, which is fine. We can find, it's, the 2-minute drill. Joe Montana's got the ball. Jerry Rice is running down the touchline, and you just know that he's going to make the pass. That's the American way, and it's what's wonderful about America. There's that belief that anything is possible. But there's a narrow dividing line between that and delusion.
Yep.
And I would just prefer a company to devote its resources to new business that it actually has a realistic chance of winning. I'll give you one very specific example. I was asked by an agency in London, excuse me, to work on a global pitch. It was a repitch for a client that it had had for 60 years. And I very quickly, in talking to the clients, figured out that this was not a pitch we were going to win. And I told people that and made the recommendation that we withdrew, and they said, no, we've got to do this. We've got to keep this business. So, cut a long story short, after 6 months of pitching, we made our final presentation, and as the clients walked out, 2 or 3 of them in slightly different words said to me, "You've made things very difficult for us." And what they meant by that was that they never expected the agency to do a good presentation. Not only did we make, as we were told later, not only did we make the best presentation, but we presented the best work. But as they said in telling us that we had lost the business, this was not an examination, it was continual assessment. And effectively 2 years before, the agency had lost the business based on client handling errors and relationship issues and so on. At the same time, the agency was pitching another very big piece of business, which would have been perfect for the agency.
I see.
But the best new business people in the agency, the best executives in all departments, were split between the 2 pitches. They were almost simultaneous, and they ended up losing both. And that brings me to my third question, which is, do we have the time to do our best work, and do we have the A-team available to pitch this? Every company has to have a small core of people who do every new business pitch, every new business presentation. They need to be a part of it. And if those resources are split, if you can only have half of your A-team on any one pitch, then your chances of winning are much reduced. So do we want it? Can we win it? Do we have time to do our best work? Those are such important questions. And if you answer those questions correctly at the start, and if the answer to all of them is yes, then throw everything into it. Throw all of your good people at it. Spend all the time you need to spend all the money you need to spend. But when you want it enough, then that spirit that you mentioned will often carry the day. The reason that in the time I worked at Goodby Silverstein, we won 90% of the new business that we pitched. That was over a 10-year period, and I think probably that success rate continues today. I'm not familiar enough with the pitches they do, but we won 90% of the pitches that we got into. We won 90% of the income that we went after. And the reason for that was that 4 out of 5 times we declined the opportunity to pitch.
I got it.
There's that John West salmon campaign that says it's the ones we throw away that make John West, what it is. That's exactly the principle for a successful new business. You've got to be able to say no. And Goodby Silverstein and Partners made only 2 or 3 new business pitches a year in the time that I was there. But we went into every one of them with absolute confidence that we could win it.
That's a good strategy.
We wanted it a lot more than the other agencies wanted it. And we knew that if we pointed all of our resources in the right direction, then they were going to have to be bloody good to beat us.
I love that. Which leads me to the second question. In your experience, you've been involved in so many pitches with a very high dollar or euro value, what are some of the common features of a successful pitch?
There are several. I think the first one is that most successful pitches are organized by a very small team.
Okay.
And there has to be a team. I mean, in the agency world, and I don't know how this varies across other businesses, but I would say you've always got to have a core team of 3 or 4 people who take absolute responsibility from the moment of being briefed to the presentation itself to any of the follow-up that has to happen afterwards. And I find that the more people who are involved in a pitch process, the more difficult and unwieldy it becomes. Mm-hmm. And it's also hard when more people are involved for the individuals concerned to take responsibility. There's always a sense when there are more people that well, if I don't do it, someone else will. Mm-hmm. And I need to know that if I've got a small tight team around me, everybody's very clear on what they need to do, and they're absolutely responsible for doing it. I've worked with a couple of agencies where the agency principals will say to a small group of people, guys, you're responsible. Go out and win this for the agency. You're our best people, and they'll puff them up. And then the night before the presentation, they'll say, okay, well, just show us what you've got. And they'll show them what they've got, and they'll go, oh my God, that's awful. You're letting us down. It's going to be a disaster. We've got to save the day. They come in, they write new ads. Everybody's confidence is shattered. They're up all night trying to make different parts of a presentation fit together when they no longer do. And usually you'll lose in those situations. So, my job if I'm running a new business pitch is very often with senior agency people to say, are you in or are you out? Mm-hmm. You're either part of this core team, you're part of every meeting and every decision, and you'll sit in a room with the other 3 or 4 of us, or you're not involved at all, or maybe you're involved in the final presentation, but I'm going to give you a script.
Yeah, and you got to follow word by word.
You're going to learn it word for word, and it will not take any longer than 3.5 minutes. I've worked with people who, are hard to get to do that. But anyway, so I said common features. I think you've got a small team that's absolutely responsible. They're typically in advertising, and I think probably in other businesses as well. You're selling an idea, and it might be a product design, but you would be wanting to sell your preferred product design. You're selling a promise of a better business relationship, maybe, but anyway, whatever it is you're ultimately selling, you're telling a story, and that story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you have to agree on what that story is going to be fairly soon in the process. And I have a rule that I use with my teams where I split the pitch process into 3 equal parts. And this, if we've got 3 days to make a presentation or 3 months, it would be exactly the same. Okay. So a third of the way through the process, you have to agree on what the idea is or what the basic story is that we're going to be telling.
Just a side note here. One of the biggest takeaways I got from the book, by the way, guys, awesome book. Make sure you get Amazon. I'm going to put a link here for your book. is the whole idea, and I suffer from this problem because sometimes we have 4 or 5 major characteristics, right? We have a problem, so we have a solution, and we pitch all of them. And something that was very clear in your book is the capacity to boil down to one major idea. And I think you give an example about if people are putting money in advertising, they say, well, I'm just going to talk about one characteristic or one benefit if I have 10. Because it's counterintuitive, because people think if I talk about 10 things, then I'm going to be able to sell more. And you're saying, no, you've got to narrow down just one focus primarily.
You've got to narrow down. The people you're presenting to have to remember your presentation. They'll be seeing several presentations, and they have to remember you as the presentation where you recommended X. Yeah. The human brain, whether it's looking at a 30-second commercial or watching a 2-hour presentation, isn't really capable of remembering much more than one thing. It's a bit like I use the example in my book. If I throw a tennis ball to you, you'll probably catch it. If I throw 2 tennis balls simultaneously, you might get one of them. You know, on a lucky day, maybe you'll get both.
Yep.
If I throw 3 tennis balls at you, you'll drop all of them.
Yep.
And the human brain works like that with messages. So I think you've got to focus down on one idea only. And as far as the splitting up of time goes, I say agree on that idea a third of the way through. Spend the next third of the time blowing the idea out in every direction that you can. So, you know, when we presented the Invent campaign to Hewlett-Packard, okay, how can we use Invent? How will that affect the packaging? How will it affect the way they recruit, you know, top university graduates? You know, there's a whole lot of different manifestations of it. And then you spend the last third of the time figuring out how to present it. And that's a chunk of time that most companies don't really allocate. There's a feeling that it should all be about the content, and don't worry, we'll figure out the presentation the night before. Big mistake.
Big mistake.
Because I don't know the exact figure, and I've seen a lot of estimates, but you know, most of them seem to run according to. Most of them would say like 80 to 90% of the effect of a presentation is not what you say, but how you say it. And if I'm going to run a successful new business team, I have to spend a huge amount of time on the how you say it part. It's one thing having a great idea, it's quite another convincing other people that it's a great idea.
Yep.
And you've got to agree the idea early enough that the members of your team can live with it, become confident with it, for it to become second nature to talk about it. They become more confident that way, they become more passionate that way, and that passion is contagious when it comes to the time for the final presentation.
Yeah, I love that. So 1/3 developing the one main idea, 1/3 blowing up the idea so you can see which directions you can go, the creative brainstorming, and 1/3 narrowing down and working on presenting the idea effectively. I love that. That's gold right here. Thank you.
Now, some clients will say, actually, we want to see all your ideas. But to me, a good story can only have one ending. You can't end a story 3 or 4 different ways. Okay. And if in coming up with an advertising solution to a client's problem, we have explored 3 or 4 ways, we've got to choose which one we prefer. We've got to choose which one we're going to recommend. And I will then use the others along the way to say, okay, here's the first idea we had and we were really excited about it, but it doesn't work for these reasons. And then that took us to this next idea, and we found a couple of things that were very, very interesting, but again, it didn't work for a couple of different reasons. And I will use that as a storytelling device, and I'll use it as a way of coming to the actual solution that we're recommending. And I'll be showing why the recommended idea works, because it doesn't fall into the traps that the previous ones did. And I will also be shooting down other agencies' work in the process, because chances are other agencies will have come up with those ideas. So I'll be explaining in no uncertain terms why they're wrong and we're right. But I'll never say that, obviously. And the only other thing I'd say about common features of good presentations is that they're very simple in the end, and they're very personal. Good storytellers, well, good stories are always simple. There is no such thing as a complicated good idea in the world. I defy anybody to find me one that is fantastic and complicated. I'm sure when Einstein came up with E=mc², he looked at it for a while and thought, oh God, that's so simple. People are going to think that's wrong. But great things are always simple. And great storytelling is personal in the sense that it asks you, the listener, or you, the reader, or you, the viewer, to put yourself into it.
Yes, there is something in your book that was brilliant. I actually use it. Was that you gave an analogy. If you were going to develop a mousetrap, make sure you leave a place for the mouse, right?
Yeah,
Because
when you're baiting, when Saki said it, the Japanese writer, philosopher, says when you're baiting a mousetrap with cheese, make sure you leave room for the mouse.
Yeah, that was really good. It was really good because storytelling is about you kind of being a little vague so people can see themselves into the story. Right? They can see themselves.
If you want to see, there's a great example of this, and it's from the Mad Men TV series, and I think it's from series 2, where Don Draper, the creative director of the agency, makes a pitch to Kodak for what we would know as a slide. It's the pitches for this piece of technology Kodak has to show slides that they call the wheel.
Okay.
And Draper and his team name it the carousel, which is what we've known those slide things as ever since. And yes, it's fiction. Yes, it's drama. But it's about a 2 to 3 minute presentation. And if you were given 3 hours for a presentation, I don't know what you would do with the other 2 hours and 57 minutes. Because this story Draper tells with the help of a slide carousel and pictures from his own life, his own family. There's pictures of his wife, pictures of his kids, pictures of him lying on the sofa in his pajamas, unshaven. He's inviting the client into his life. He's not Don Draper, the creative director. He's Don Draper, the family man, Don Draper, the human being. And it's impossible for anybody looking at that presentation to not put themselves and their family into that situation.
I love that.
I recommend that your viewers try to find this, and it's from series 2 of Mad Men, and it's a presentation on the wheel, but it's fantastic.
I wanna search. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. I'm gonna type it up.
It must be because it's very very good. But it's simple and it's personal and it's confident and it's passionate and it's human, and it's conversational. He starts off by saying, he says in my first job, he's talking about some advice a guy gave him in his first job, and he could have said, in my first job my boss told me, but he doesn't. He says, I remember my first job. It was in a fur company. I worked for this old copywriter, a Greek named Teddy. And he's taking you layer by layer into this story, and you're meeting this guy, and you get the sense of this old industry pro who's been around so long, and what Teddy told him obviously has greater value because of the expertise that's implied, and it's just beautiful the way he draws people into the story.
Well, I'm going to look at it.
If you make presentations like that, they'll do well.
Awesome. So that which leads me to my question number 3. Probably by the time I'm done reading your book, I'm like, man, I got to step it up on the level of preparation of my talks, because usually I have a rule. I go over 7 times a presentation, me personally, my rule. And then I read your book, and the closing story about the team that pitched for the London Olympics, and they said that they had 35 revisions. I'm like, 35 revisions. So I wanted, from your experience of pitching all these big businesses, let's talk about preparation, because that's one area that people don't like to prepare. Like you said before, They spend all the time in idea, not on preparation. So let's talk about that. How do you prepare for a pitch?
I worked for a while in an agency in New York, and I was asked to come and run a new business. And I said to one of the people who'd been involved in some recent pitches, how do you rehearse? What's your general approach to rehearsal? And he said, oh, we don't rehearse. We like to be spontaneous. And then I said, so your last 6 pitches, how did you go? He goes, we lost all of them. And I wasn't really surprised. I think it was Churchill who once said, spontaneity is too important to be left to chance. And for me, rehearsal is all about getting a team to a point where they are so familiar with each other's parts of the presentation that they can be spontaneous in a very rehearsed and controlled way. I prepare for a pitch like I would prepare for a theatrical production, and you go through exactly the same stages. and I'm just talking about the final third here, where we're looking at presentation itself. Obviously, there's a great deal of preparation has to go into the development of the idea, and actually, as I'm developing the idea and honing in on the one that's going to be our recommendation, I'm already thinking about the way that I might tell that story. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I will pitch an idea that maybe isn't the most perfect idea in itself, but I know that it's the perfect idea to present in a new business pitch. I know that the story around that idea will be more compelling. And in the end, we're not, there's another important point I made in my book, you're not looking for perfection, you're looking to win. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people get those things confused. My former creative partner in San Francisco was once asked by a client after he'd shown a campaign, he said, "Rich, is that the best campaign you could possibly have presented to me?" And Rich says, "I don't know, is your wife the best person you could have possibly married?" There's an uncomfortable silence in the room after that. I think he has a point. And, in the process of developing a pitch, you have to make choices, and you have to make the best choice you can make at the time. Yep. And that choice should be directed not towards being 100%, but to being the thing that gives you the best chance of winning. I still think that an 80% idea that's agreed long in advance and prepared well, and then presented with confidence and passion, will be a 95% idea that's arrived at the night before the presentation. Pretty much every time.
That's brilliant. That's so true. That is so true.
But anyway, sorry, I digress a little. But in terms of the presentation itself, you have to make a decision who's going to be in the room. And a common mistake a lot of companies make is to put a lot of people in the room because they've been part of the presentation and because it's owed to them in some way. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. You should only be in the room if you've got a role, and a real substantive role. It's always possible to find little roles for people, but that's patronizing. Mm-hmm. Okay, you hold the boards.
It's about them, not the client, not the outcome.
Yeah. Everything has to be about the client, and if the client has 5 people in the room, then you probably should only have 4 or 5 in the room yourself. If it's one person coming, maybe you only have 2 people present. Mm-hmm. Are the clients, are they all males? Are they all females? Let's make sure we don't make a presentation to 5 women when it's 5 men standing on the presenting side. Mm-hmm. That some of those things can create a weird dynamic. But having decided who's going to be in the room, you all sit around a table and you say, rather like a first script reading in a theatrical production, you sit around and you say, okay, what are we trying to get across in this presentation? What do we want the client to take away? And what have we got to present? And how are we going to split that up? What are the roles that each of us are going to play? So in the context of an advertising presentation, we might say, okay, Jon Steel, you're going to present the strategy and you're going to talk about the relationship that people have with milk. And you will take the presentation up to the point where you say the big insight here is that the only time people think about milk is when they haven't got any. Therefore, in our advertising, we're going to create the desire for milk through using companion foods. We're going to get people to metaphorically take a bite out of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a chocolate chip cookie or a brownie, and then there is going to be no milk for them to wash it down. And that is going to remind them of all the times they've run out of milk and how unpleasant it will be. And then I'll hand over to the creative director who'll present the campaign. So we'll talk about the roles that we're going to play, and then we'll go away and write a rough script of what this is going to say. Now, there will always be someone who says, oh, but John, I don't need to rehearse. I'm a really good presenter. And I go, that's fantastic, Derek. I know you're a good presenter. You're a god among presenters. However, the point of rehearsal is not for you to become an even greater presenter than you already are. The point is for other people to know what you're saying. the other members of the team to know what you're saying and how you're saying it, so that they can craft their part of the presentation and connect it to what you're saying, so that there's a linear thread running through. It's a plot, and if I know that Rich Silverstein, my creative director, is going to present an idea, and the line, let's say it's Hewlett Packard, and the line is invent, I will use language in my part of the presentation that sows the seeds for that, that will introduce the idea of relevant invention, and will tie it back to the company's founding principles of creating technology for the benefit of mankind. And I'll sow that idea so that by the time Rich shows the campaign and shows the line, it will already feel familiar to people. So we just go through the various stages. It's okay. Here's roughly what I'm going to say, and then we go away and we write a more detailed script. And here's exactly what I'm going to say. And then you're looking at how the different parts fit together. Maybe there's a bit of overlap. Perhaps that repetition is good because it solidifies an idea. Maybe we ask somebody to take out a piece of their presentation and put it into the next person's presentation. Maybe we cut parts altogether. But over probably 5 or 6 different meetings, we go from everybody just talking in general terms about what they're going to say to a dress rehearsal where they are presenting exactly the way they would on the day of the client presentation. And that has to be done in a space that is similar to the space that we'll be presenting in. Often we have to go to somebody else's office to do it.
Yep.
If you're presenting somewhere other than in your own conference room, you have to send somebody ahead and know what room that you're going to be presenting in, have pictures of it, know the dimensions of it, figure out if you're going to be showing architectural designs or advertising ideas and they're going to be mounted on boards, where can you put the boards along the side of the room, which end are you going to present from. I work in an agency in Sydney that has a big boardroom, and the connections for the computer ridiculously come out of a hole in the middle of the very long boardroom table, right in the center of it. Nobody should present from the center of that table, because they'll be presenting and the screen will be somewhere over on the right hand. When you're presenting and you're showing visual aids, you should always be standing right by them. And if you need presenter notes on your computer, your laptop needs to be right in front of you. So somebody needs to have figured that out, and if necessary, bring a really long extension cable so that you can still fit into their projector system. And by the way, you should always bring a spare projector and a spare laptop just in case, because these sod's law is that the presentation, the technology will get stuffed up. And that means that you also have to have a plan B. Rehearse it with all the, all singing, all dancing technology that you want, but you've got to have a plan B for if that doesn't work. And I always ask for somebody on my pitch team to write a 1-page summary of the presentation. I don't like sending PowerPoint slides to people because they never tell a proper story. That's a much longer than what to have here. But a 1-page, well-crafted prose summary is the equivalent of what management consultants call the elevator pitch, where at the end of the presentation, the scenario is you've made your presentation, you get in the elevator, the chairman happens to be in the elevator, and he says, okay, what did you guys say? Somebody needs to be able to tell the story between the 19th floor and the lobby. And you can do that live, or you can hand him a sheet of paper and say, actually, everything important that we said is on this one sheet of letter-sized paper. And some of the best pitches I've been involved with have actually been ones where the technology has gone wrong, but we've then had an old-fashioned conversation. But we're so well prepared that we can have that conversation without showing slides. And the very act of writing that 1-page summary really focuses you on the important points of the presentation. So
quickly, we talk about Man, you gave so much. We talk about 3 quick strategies. I mean, you already shared so many here, so many during the call.
Yeah. Sorry, I probably bored people to death. Okay. Well, my 3 strategies are, first of all, this goes back to our first question.
Yep.
Pitch only what you want and truly believe you can win.
Yep.
So learn. I suppose you could summarize that by saying learn to say no.
Love that.
And I would argue that the word no is the most powerful word in a successful new business strategy.
That's good. That's really good. Number 2?
Number 2, agree on an idea and a story for your pitch early. Mm-hmm. So figure out what your story is going to be and agree it a third of the way through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then make that story work, in as many different ways as you can. Okay. And then the third strategy is to rehearse again. Be prepared. If you're not, then you'll reduce your chances of winning.
Yes. Outstanding. I want to give you 3 resources. The resource number 1, because I read the book. Everybody that I interview, I read the book, and if I like it, then I obviously interview. So here's the book, guys. I'm gonna put a picture here. Perfect pitch. I think what I love about the book is filled with the stories. The closing story, I'm not gonna take away, is just phenomenal. I read so fast. It's just phenomenal. And some pitches, when you think about if you're a lawyer, if you're a financial planner, or if you're a loan officer, if you're a realtor, and you listen to Jon is using to pitch like huge businesses, but all the principles here apply to you, apply to me. So I would highly encourage resource number 1, get this book. You won't regret it. You're gonna love it. What's another resource for them, Jon, to keep learning?
First of all, thank you for mentioning my book. I'm much too modest to have done so myself. The second one, it's an interesting one, and there is a book written by this guy. It's a New Yorker writer called Jeffrey Toobin, who writes about legal issues. There was an article he published in the New Yorker magazine, and I think I can't see on the note here. I can't see the exact reference for it, but you can provide that, I hope, Roberto.
I think it's verdict. Yep.
It's the article was called "The Marcia Clark Verdict," and it was about the O.J. Simpson trial, and he subsequently wrote a book about the O.J. Simpson trial. But I think the article in the New Yorker is a more succinct and better version of it. But it describes what went wrong for the prosecution in the O.J. trial, and it describes what the defense did right. And it's an example I referred to in my book as well. But I think it's one of the best examples of good presentation and bad presentation, of persuasive presentation and presentation for presentation's sake. It's a fantastic story, and it just demonstrates so many examples of best practice and worst practice in presentation. And this is in the context of a trial, obviously.
Awesome. And go ahead. In the third resource.
The third one, I work with a guy in London named Jeremy Bullmore, Bullmore. Jeremy was at one time creative director and chairman of the J. Walter Thompson advertising agency in London, and he still works for WPP in the parent company. And he's, probably the smartest person I've ever worked with, and is funny and has great common sense. He's not just intelligent, but he has fantastic common sense to balance it. And he writes about communication. He writes a column in Campaign magazine, but the book that I'm going to recommend is called Behind the Scenes in Advertising, by Jeremy Bullmore. And it's a series of essays that he's written over the years. But they just look at communication and what works in communication and what doesn't work in communication, and looks at it in the broadest possible context. And there's a lot of lessons in there. It's a really enjoyable read, and and B, there's a lot of lessons in there that I think would help anybody in making presentations to actual or potential clients.
Love it. I'm gonna get that too. Jon, I appreciate you, my friend, taking the time to present to us from Australia. I'm here in San Diego. So, do you have any closing message for our community here?
No, just thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for listening, if indeed anybody has, and good luck to everybody in their new business pursuits.
Thanks so much, my friend. Looking forward to reading your other book, The Truth Lies in Advertising. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
See you.